Last week, a federal judge in the Northern District of Florida, Kent Wetherell, ruled that the Biden administration's policy of parole and alternatives to detention is unlawful. The judge stated, in part, that the administration had effectively turned the southwest border into a meaningless line in the sand and little more than a speed bump for aliens flooding into the country. Chief Ortiz, my question for you is this. Were you aware of Judge Wetherell's ruling and his conclusion about that parole and alternatives to detention policy?
Congresswoman Lee, thank you for the question. And yes, I am aware. I was deposed for that case, and then on January 10th, I was in testimony before the judge in Florida. So I was aware of his final ruling last week.
To this point, have any of the policies related to parole and alternatives to detention been modified or adjusted in light of the court's ruling?
So we weren't paroling over the last several months. Our numbers in the last 60 days have dropped significantly. We're averaging about 4,800 apprehensions. So there wasn't a requirement for us to parole. We release to detention or to ICE enforcement removal operations, and then we've been able to leverage Title 42 considerably. And so we haven't had to leverage that over the last 60 days.
So to this point, have any of the policies at Border Patrol been modified or adjusted, or had to have been modified or adjusted in light of the court's ruling?
In light of the court's ruling, what we did is we informed all sectors that they were not to parole individuals outside of specific individual case for a humanitarian reason, or if somebody was a material witness in a human trafficking case.
And to your knowledge, are there any plans to make further modifications, or do you feel like the changes that have been made so far are adequate?
I think the changes that have been made so far are adequate, ma'am. Okay.
I'd like to return to the discussion of infrastructure. And specifically, we know that during this administration, the border wall itself, construction on the border wall itself was halted. Did that halting of construction include shutting off other technology installations like lighting and roads and other things attendant to that construction?
Yeah, the proposed requirement of 750 miles of border wall infrastructure included roads, lighting, and camera systems. We currently have about 450 miles of border wall constructed along the southwest border. We had some projects that were midway through the construction process. And so what we have done is looked at all of those projects individually and have submitted a request to the Secretary to have approval to continue those projects. He has granted approval in, I believe, 29 of those projects already, and we have an additional slate of projects that we're going to be presenting to him and others to make sure that we can try and get those approved as quickly as possible.
So would it be accurate to say that completion of the wall and those attendant structures, the lights, the roads, the things you described, would be helpful to you and the agents who are out there and performing your job? Yes, ma'am. One of the things that the Secretary and I firmly agree on, that infrastructure is important to securing the southwest border. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to turn to ports of entry and a discussion there. So is it accurate to say that drug cartels are operating both at ports of entry and then also coming across the border and operating through places that are not designated ports of entry? With respect to narcotics, what we've seen this fiscal year is 101% increase in fentanyl seizures in between the ports of entry. So far, 1,117 pounds of fentanyl have been seized by our Border Patrol agents in between the ports of entry. Secretary directed us 2 weeks ago to start a fentanyl-driven operation, not just the Border Patrol, but our field operations officers at our ports of entry
and to include our ICE investigators, and we are partnering with DEA to take the fight to the cartels, specifically in certain locations. And so this is a priority for us, and I'm excited that we're going to be able to show some significant results based upon adding additional resources in certain areas.
Thank you, Chief. And with that, my time has expired. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.